She lived in a small apartment on a quiet street in the city. Her life was simple, almost too simple to notice. Every morning, she would wake up to the sound of birds outside her window. The sunlight would come slowly through the curtains, spilling softly across the worn wooden floor. She would make herself a cup of tea and sit by the window, watching the city wake up. People hurried past, cars honked, and the usual noise of the city filled the air. But she remained calm, almost invisible. No one really knew her. She liked it that way. Her days were a routine of quiet work and quiet moments at home. She worked in a small bookstore, a place filled with the smell of old pages and fresh coffee. Customers came in and out, asking for books or recommendations. She would smile, help them find what they needed, and sometimes chat for a few minutes, but she always kept a part of herself hidden. Her coworkers thought she was shy, a little distant, but they liked her gentle ways. She never drew attention to herself. That was her choice. She had friends, but not many. Her social life was minimal, and she preferred it that way. Parties and loud gatherings were not for her. She enjoyed quiet dinners with a close friend, a long walk in the park, or sitting in a cafe, watching people pass by. Her life was small, but it was peaceful. She had learned long ago that being unnoticed had its advantages. There was freedom in being invisible. Despite her quiet life, she carried a secret that she had kept for many years. She was married, but her husband was not a man from her neighborhood, or even someone anyone would expect. He was a man of great wealth and influence, someone who could fill a room with his presence just by walking in. Yet she had never appeared publicly with him. Their marriage was real, legal, and binding, but she chose to remain hidden. She did not want the world to see her, and he respected that. They had their own understanding, a life together that no one else could touch. Her apartment was small, but it was hers. She had filled it with things that made her feel at home. A few pictures of landscapes she loved, books stacked in every corner, a small piano in the living room that she occasionally played when she felt like it. She had always loved music. It was her escape, a way to feel something deeper, something real. Sometimes, late at night, she would sit at the piano and let her fingers dance across the keys. The notes would fill the empty rooms and seem to bring her memories to life. No one heard it but her. The music was hers alone. One morning, as she was walking to work, she noticed a man standing outside the bookstore. He looked familiar, but she couldn't place him. He smiled politely and walked away when he saw her. She shrugged it off and continued inside. Her day went on as usual, helping customers, arranging books, and keeping the store tidy. But she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was starting to notice things about her. Small things that she had kept hidden. Later that evening, she received a letter. It was not like the usual mail she got. There were no bills or advertisements, just a simple envelope with her name on it. She hesitated before opening it. Her heart beat a little faster than usual. Inside, there was a note, written in neat handwriting. People are starting to talk about your family. Be careful. She read it twice, then put it down. Who could have sent this? And why? Her life had always been quiet. She had never done anything to attract attention. And yet, someone knew enough to warn her. She tried not to think too much about it. After all, warnings could be empty. But a small seed of worry had been planted. She finished her day at the bookstore and walked home, keeping her eyes open, but seeing nothing unusual. Still, the thought lingered in her mind. Could it be that the quiet life she had built was about to change? She hoped not. Change had never been something she welcomed easily. Back in her apartment, she made herself dinner. It was a simple meal, but she ate slowly, thinking about the note. She wondered if her husband had received anything similar. They had always communicated in private, their conversations intimate and careful. But this was different. This was public. Someone outside of their small world had noticed her. The thought was unsettling. After dinner, she sat by the window again, watching the city lights flicker on as night fell. She let the note sit on the table beside her, unopened in a way, though she had read it. She thought about her life, about the choices she had made. She had chosen to be hidden, to live quietly, to avoid the eyes of the world. And yet, the world was starting to look her way, whether she wanted it or not. She remembered the early days of her marriage, the joy and the fear of being connected to someone so powerful. They had promised each other that they would protect their private life at all costs. She had learned to navigate a delicate balance, being part of a world she would never show publicly, enjoying the comfort of wealth and influence from the shadows. It had not been easy, but it had been hers. Now, for the first time, she felt that balance might be tipping. As the night deepened, she played the piano softly. The music seemed to calm her, each note a reminder of who she was beneath the layers of secrecy. She thought about the years she had spent being invisible, and about the reasons she had chosen that path. Sometimes it had been fear, sometimes it had been comfort. But now, the world seemed ready to pull her out of the shadows, and she did not know if she was ready. The next day at work, things felt slightly different. A customer mentioned seeing a photograph of her husband in a magazine, and she realized with a start that they might be connecting her to him in ways she had never expected. She smiled politely, said nothing, and returned to shelving books. Her coworkers did not notice anything unusual, but she could feel the subtle shift. The quiet life she loved was beginning to tremble. By evening, she received another letter, this one even simpler. Your name is becoming known. Prepare yourself. She held the paper in her hands and stared at it, her mind racing. Who was watching? Why now? She could feel her pulse quicken. Her life had been quiet, almost invisible, and suddenly the world was brushing against her without her consent. It was unsettling, but also strangely thrilling. She went to bed that night feeling a mix of anxiety and anticipation. She had spent years in the shadows, and now the shadows were receding. What would happen when people discovered her? How much of herself would she have to show? Could she remain herself when the world finally looked at her? Sleep came fitfully, filled with dreams of faces she did not recognize, questions she could not answer, and a life she had always kept secret now exposed to the light. When she woke, she felt a strange determination. She had been invisible for so long, but she knew that her life was about to change. Whether she liked it or not, the world would soon discover her last name, and with it, everything she had kept hidden. She dressed carefully, went through her morning routine, and left for work with a steady pace. The city was alive as always, but now it felt different. There was a tension in the air that had not been there before. She walked past familiar streets, people and shops, feeling as if she was seeing them for the first time. Every glance from a passerby seemed loaded with curiosity she could not see. She felt the invisible thread of attention stretching toward her, pulling her into a world she had avoided for so long. By the time she reached the bookstore, she knew that the life she had known, quiet, small and safe, was beginning to slip away. She greeted customers, arranged books, and kept a calm exterior. But inside, she was preparing for a change she had never asked for. The letters, the glances, the warnings, all pointed to a new chapter, one where her name, her identity, and her presence could no longer remain hidden. And though fear whispered in the corners of her mind, a small spark of courage also ignited. Perhaps, for the first time, she was ready to face the world, no matter what it might bring. She woke up the next morning with a restless feeling she could not shake. The letters, the strange glances, and the small hints that someone had noticed her life had left her unsettled. She tried to convince herself that it was nothing, that her quiet life would continue as before. But deep down, she knew things were already changing. At the bookstore, the air felt heavier. Customers moved as usual, but she noticed small details she had never paid attention to before. Someone lingering too long near the magazine stand, a question asked in passing about someone with her last name, a look that seemed to linger just a moment too long. She felt as though the invisible walls she had built around herself were slowly dissolving. Her coworkers noticed her distraction but said nothing. She smiled politely when they asked if she was all right, keeping her feelings hidden. She could not tell them about her life, about the reason she had chosen to remain in the shadows. It was a secret she had carried for years, and it had kept her safe. But now, the safety she had known felt fragile. After work, She went home and found another letter waiting on her table. This one was shorter, more direct. People are asking questions. Your world is changing. Be careful. She held it in her hands and felt a rush of emotions. Fear, frustration, and a strange sense of curiosity. Who was watching her? And why did they care enough to warn her? She poured herself a cup of tea and sat by the window, staring out at the city lights. The streets were filled with people, each moving quickly, oblivious to the small drama unfolding in her quiet life. She thought about her husband. He had always respected her wish to remain hidden. Their marriage was private, a bond that few could understand. They shared moments that no one else would ever see, laughter and love that existed only in their secluded world. But now, even that privacy seemed at risk. She picked up her phone and sent a quick message to him, keeping the words simple. Someone is noticing things. I feel exposed. She waited for a reply, her heart beating fast. Within minutes, his response came, "Stay calm. I will handle it. We will remain safe. Remember, you are mine. No one else matters." His words gave her comfort, but the worry in her chest did not disappear. The letters were real, the attention was real, and she could not pretend that everything was as it had always been. Days passed and the tension grew. She began noticing small changes in her routine. People she had never seen before appeared near her apartment, lingering across the street or in the cafe she often visited. She felt the weight of their eyes, though no one ever approached her. It was the feeling of being watched, a sensation she had avoided for years. She wondered if she had been too careful, if her hidden life had finally attracted curiosity she could not control. One evening, she decided to confront the situation. She went for a walk, taking a route she rarely used. The streets were quieter, and the night was cool. She moved slowly, eyes alert, and ears attentive to every sound. As she turned a corner, she noticed a man standing near a lamppost, watching her. He looked familiar, the same person she had seen before near the bookstore. She stopped, heart racing, but he did not move. He simply nodded, a silent acknowledgement of something she did not understand. Then he walked away. She exhaled, a mix of relief and fear, and continued home. At home, she sat at her piano and let her fingers glide across the keys. The music calmed her, but her mind was active. She thought about the years she had spent living quietly, about the choices that had led her here. She had given up recognition, fame, and even some freedoms to protect her private life. Now, the world seemed determined to pull her from that safety, and she did not know if she was ready. She remembered the early days of her marriage. Her husband had been kind, patient, and understanding. He had never demanded that she appear in public or participate in events that made her uncomfortable. Their love had been built on trust and mutual respect. They had shared a life away from prying eyes, filled with quiet moments and gentle conversations. But the letters and glances hinted that their careful balance was at risk. The next day, she found herself at a small cafe, trying to enjoy her morning coffee. She noticed a woman at the next table glancing at her repeatedly, then quickly looking away. It was a subtle thing, but it made her uneasy. She wondered if people were connecting dots she had never meant to reveal. Her heart beat faster, and she finished her coffee quickly, leaving a tip and walking out without looking back. When she arrived at the bookstore, her thoughts were still on the woman. She tried to focus on her work, arranging books and helping customers, but she felt distracted. A man came in asking for a book related to her family, using her last name without realizing it. She smiled, hid her surprise, and helped him find what he needed. But inside, she was shaken. Her hidden life was slowly being exposed, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. That evening, she sat down to write in her journal, a habit she had kept for years. She wrote about her feelings, the strange events, and the growing tension. Writing helped her organize her thoughts, though it did not lessen the worry in her heart. She wrote about her love for husband, their quiet life, and the choices that had brought her to this moment. She hoped that by recording her thoughts, she could maintain some control over the chaos that was creeping into her life. The following days brought more subtle signs that her life was no longer her own. People mentioned her in passing, sometimes directly, sometimes indirectly. Questions were asked that hinted at her connection to her husband. She smiled and deflected, keeping her secret safe, but she knew that the walls she had built were beginning to crumble. The world was noticing her, and she could not hide forever. One night, a knock at her door startled her. She opened it to find a young man holding a folder. He introduced himself as someone seeking information about her family. She remained calm, listened to his questions, and politely declined to answer. He left, but she knew this was only the beginning. People were curious, and curiosity often led to exposure. She closed the door and leaned against it, feeling the weight of her hidden life pressing down on her. Her husband called that evening. She explained everything, the letters, the strangers, the questions. He listened carefully and reassured her. He reminded her of the precautions they had always taken and promised to handle the situation. His calm voice helped, but she knew that the world's interest was growing. Their private life, once safe and secure, was now under subtle threat. As the days passed, she became more vigilant. She watched her surroundings carefully, noting unfamiliar faces and unusual behaviors. She took small precautions, walking different routes, changing her routines slightly, and keeping her personal life tightly controlled. She realized that living quietly required constant attention, and the peace she had once known was fragile. Yet, despite the fear and tension, there was a strange sense of anticipation. She felt alive in a way she had not felt before. The world was reaching toward her, challenging her hidden existence. She was no longer invisible, and that realization was both terrifying and exhilarating. She began to wonder what it would mean to step out of the shadows, to show herself to the world she had avoided for so long. Her life had always been quiet, controlled, and predictable. Now, unpredictability loomed, and with it came choices she had never faced. She could continue to hide, hoping that attention would pass, or she could prepare to face the world, revealing parts of herself that had remained private for years. The thought of exposure was frightening, but also strangely freeing. For the first time, she felt the possibility of living without the constant weight of invisibility. She sat at her piano that night, letting the music flow through her. Each note was a reminder of who she was beneath the layers of secrecy. She thought about her husband, their shared life, and the love that had remained constant despite the pressures of the outside world. She thought about herself, her choices, and the courage she would need in the days ahead. The world was changing, and she would have to change with it whether she wanted to or not. By the time she went to bed, she felt a mixture of anxiety and determination. The hidden life she had cherished was beginning to unravel, but she was not powerless. She had made it this far by being careful, wise, and observant. Now, she would have to add courage to those qualities. The letters, the strangers, and the questions were signs that her private world was shifting. She knew that the next steps she took would shape her life in ways she had never imagined. And for the first time, she felt ready to meet those steps head-on. Even as the unknown loomed ahead, IT started with a small photograph, barely noticed at first. A magazine had published an article about a successful businessman, her husband, and in the background of one picture, there she was. No one recognized her immediately, but the sharp eyes of the world did. Social media picked it up, and soon her name, though never spoken before, began to circulate in whispers and posts. She was at the bookstore when she first learned. A young customer came in holding the magazine. "Are you?" he asked, hesitating. She smiled politely, denying any connection, and directed him to a book. But the seed was planted. By the next day, more people were asking questions. Her quiet, invisible life was no longer hers alone. At home, she tried to keep her composure. She opened her computer and searched her name out of curiosity and fear. The results shocked her. There were pages, posts, and comments speculating about her identity. People wondered how she had lived quietly for so long while being connected to someone so powerful. Some praised her privacy. Others questioned why she had remained hidden. The sudden attention felt overwhelming. She had never sought recognition, and yet the world seemed determined to give it to her. Her husband called immediately. He could sense her unease through the phone. "I see them finding you," he said calmly. "Do not worry. We will manage this together." She clung to his words, but anxiety lingered. The world had discovered a part of her life that she had tried to protect, and now there was no going back. The days that followed were a whirlwind. People began approaching her more directly. A journalist visited the bookstore, asking politely for an interview. She refused, smiling and explaining that she preferred to stay out of the public eye. Yet, the more she resisted, the more the curiosity grew. It was as if the act of hiding had only increased people's desire to see her. She felt cornered, yet she was determined not to lose herself in the process. Despite her attempts to remain calm, she could not ignore the attention. Friends and acquaintances, those who had never known about her marriage, started noticing connections. A distant relative saw her photograph online and reached out with questions. People who had always thought of her as ordinary now saw her differently. Her quiet life was transforming into a spectacle she had never wanted. She found herself constantly checking her surroundings. Every stranger on the street felt like a possible observer, every passing glance loaded with meaning. She became more cautious, more deliberate in her movements. Even the simple act of walking to the grocery store felt charged with tension. Her world, once familiar and safe, was now unpredictable. One afternoon, she received an invitation to a high-profile event. Her husband had been asked to attend, and her presence had been suggested by someone who had noticed her in the magazine photograph. She stared at the invitation, heart pounding. The thought of entering a public space where everyone might be watching filled her with dread. But she also felt a strange pull, an invitation to step out of the shadows and face the world directly. Could she do it? Should she? She discussed it with her husband that evening. He listened to her fears and concerns. "You do not have to go," he said. "But if you choose to, know that I will be by your side. This is your moment, not a test." His support gave her strength. She realized that she could face the world without losing herself, as long as she had the courage to stand firm in who she was. The day of the event arrived. She dressed carefully, choosing something elegant yet understated. She wanted to be seen, but she did not want to feel exposed. Her husband held her hand as they entered the venue. The room was filled with influential people, flashing cameras, and whispered conversations. She felt the weight of their attention but drew strength from the fact that she was not alone. As she moved through the room, people began to recognize her. Some whispered her name, others stared, and a few approached to introduce themselves. She remained polite, smiling, and answering questions cautiously. Each interaction was a reminder that her life was no longer hidden. The world was finally seeing her, not just as the wife of a powerful man, but as a person in her own right. The event was both exhilarating and exhausting. She felt a sense of accomplishment for having faced her fears. She realized that being visible did not have to mean losing control. She could navigate this new world on her terms, with dignity and grace. Her husband's presence was a constant reassurance, reminding her that their private bond remained strong even in public spaces. After the event, she returned home and reflected on the day. The experience had been intense, but it had also shown her a different side of herself. She was capable of facing scrutiny, curiosity, and attention without losing her sense of self. The world could notice her, but it could not define her. That realization was empowering. The days following the event were filled with new experiences. Invitations to interviews, public appearances, and social gatherings arrived steadily. She navigated them carefully, choosing which ones to attend and which to decline. Each decision was a step toward defining her new life, a life where she was no longer hidden but remained true to herself. She also began to see how others responded to her presence. People admired her courage, respected her privacy, and were intrigued by her story. The attention, once overwhelming, began to feel manageable. She realized that being recognized did not mean losing control. It meant having the opportunity to shape how she was seen and understood. Her relationship with her husband grew even stronger. They faced this new phase together, supporting each other in ways that deepened their connection. He admired her strength, her ability to remain composed under pressure, and her determination to maintain her identity. She admired his patience, his unwavering support, and his belief in her ability to handle the world outside their private life. As the weeks passed, she found a rhythm. She balanced public appearances with private moments, ensuring that her quiet life was not lost in the process. She spent mornings at the bookstore, afternoons attending selected events, and evenings with her husband, playing music or enjoying peaceful walks. The world had discovered her, but she had discovered herself as well. One evening, as she played the piano, she thought about how far she had come. From a hidden, invisible life to a world that now knew her name. She had faced fear, uncertainty, and attention. And through it all, she had remained true to herself. The music filled her apartment, a reminder of her inner strength and resilience. She knew that the attention would continue, that the world would always be curious. But she no longer feared it. She had learned that being seen did not mean losing control. She could navigate the challenges, maintain her privacy, and still engage with the world on her terms. The hidden life she had once cherished had ended, but in its place was a life richer in experience, connection, and self-awareness. She sat back, taking a deep breath, feeling a sense of calm she had not known in months. The journey was far from over, but she was ready. Ready to face the world, ready to embrace recognition, and ready to continue living a life that was no longer invisible. She had been discovered, but she had also discovered herself. The days that followed her first public appearance were filled with new challenges. She had stepped into the light, and now she had to navigate a world that was curious, sometimes critical, and often overwhelming. Every phone call, every email, and every message carried a weight she had never experienced before. She had lived years in quiet solitude, and now attention followed her everywhere she went. Her husband continued to be her anchor. He reminded her that she could choose what she shared, where she went, and who she allowed into her private life. With his support, she began to face these challenges with more confidence. She realized that being recognized did not mean losing control over her own life. It meant learning how to manage attention and using it wisely. One morning, she received an invitation to speak at a community event about women balancing private and public life. She hesitated at first. Public speaking had never been her strength, and the thought of standing before a room full of people terrified her. But she also felt a spark of determination. This could be an opportunity to show the world not just her name, but her thoughts, values, and strength. She accepted, deciding to prepare herself carefully. In the days leading up to the event, she practiced tirelessly. She wrote down her thoughts, rehearsed her speech in front of mirrors, and even recorded herself to listen and improve. Each practice session brought a mixture of nerves and excitement. She realized that stepping into the public was not only about recognition but also about courage and personal growth. She had never done anything like this before, and the challenge awakened a new side of her. The day of the speech arrived. She dressed simply but elegantly, choosing attire that made her feel both confident and comfortable. Her husband walked with her to the venue, offering quiet words of encouragement. She could feel her heartbeat in her chest, but she also felt a sense of readiness she had not known before. This was her moment to face the world on her terms. As she stepped onto the stage, she felt a wave of attention sweep over her. The room was filled with people, all eager to hear her speak. She took a deep breath, looked around, and began to talk. Her voice trembled slightly at first, but as she continued, she found her rhythm. She spoke about her life, the challenges of remaining private in a world that demands attention, and the lessons she had learned about strength, courage, and self-respect. Each word came from her heart, resonating with the audience. The response was immediate. People listened intently, nodding, smiling, and sometimes shedding tears. She felt a connection she had never known, a sense of influence that was both humbling and empowering. She realized that being seen could be a powerful tool, not just a source of exposure. Through her words, she could inspire others, show them the value of courage, and offer guidance on navigating life with dignity. After the event, she was approached by several people who thanked her for her honesty and courage. Their words touched her deeply. She had spent so many years hidden, and now she understood that stepping forward could make a difference. She began to see her public presence not as a threat but as an opportunity to impact lives positively. Despite the positive experiences, challenges remained. Not everyone responded with kindness. Some questioned her motives, speculated about her marriage, and even spread rumors. She felt the sting of criticism, the weight of public judgment, but she refused to let it define her. She reminded herself that she could control her reactions, her choices, and her integrity. The world could notice her, but it could not take away her sense of self. Her husband remained a constant source of strength. He helped her navigate difficult situations, offering advice, protection, and unwavering support. Together, they developed strategies to handle media attention, manage public appearances, and maintain their private life. Their partnership grew stronger as they faced these challenges together, reinforcing the bond that had always been the foundation of her hidden life. She also discovered that facing public attention required practical changes. She became more aware of her routines, the people around her, and the way she interacted with strangers. She adjusted her daily habits, choosing safer routes, being cautious about what she shared online, and managing her personal information carefully. These steps helped her feel more secure, allowing her to engage with the world without fear. At home, she returned to the piano, letting music soothe her mind. The notes reminded her of her roots, her quiet life, and the inner strength that had carried her this far. She realized that while the world had changed, some things remained constant. Her love for music, her bond with her husband, and her personal values were unshakable. They gave her the foundation to face any challenge with confidence. She began to explore other opportunities for engagement. Invitations to charitable events, small interviews, and panel discussions arrived regularly. She selected them carefully, ensuring that each participation aligned with her values and comfort level. She learned to say no politely, assertively, and without guilt. Each decision reinforced her control over her life and strengthened her confidence. As her public presence grew, she also started mentoring young women in her community. She shared her experiences, offering guidance on self-respect, courage, and the importance of staying true to oneself. She found joy in helping others navigate challenges similar to those she had faced. Through these interactions, she discovered a sense of purpose she had never anticipated. Despite the successes, she never forgot the importance of privacy. She continued to enjoy quiet mornings at her apartment, walks in the park, and moments of solitude at the piano. These private moments were essential for her well-being, a reminder that she could engage with the world without losing the tranquility that had always been her refuge. Her life had become a balance between visibility and privacy, attention and solitude. She learned to embrace the challenges, manage the scrutiny, and make thoughtful choices about how and when to reveal herself. Each experience strengthened her resolve, taught her resilience, and deepened her understanding of the world. One evening, after a long day of meetings and interviews, she sat by the window, watching the city lights flicker on. She reflected on how far she had come, from a hidden, invisible life to a world that now knew her name and admired her courage. She realized that challenges were not obstacles but opportunities to grow, to assert herself, and to influence the world positively. Her husband joined her, bringing a cup of tea. They sat together in silence, sharing the comfort of each other's presence. He smiled at her, pride shining in his eyes. She felt a warmth in her chest, a reassurance that despite the challenges, she was not alone. Their love had remained strong, unshaken by attention, scrutiny, or speculation. It was a constant, grounding her in every step she took. As the night deepened, she returned to her piano. Her fingers moved across the keys with ease, each note a reminder of who she was and the strength she carried within. She realized that facing the world did not mean abandoning her private life. Instead, it meant embracing both parts of herself, the visible and the hidden, and finding harmony between them. She knew that challenges would continue to arise. Attention, curiosity, and criticism were now part of her life. But she no longer feared them. She had learned to face the world with courage, wisdom, and grace. She had discovered that being recognized could coexist with maintaining her identity, her values, and her peace. Her journey had taught her resilience, the power of self-belief, and the importance of boundaries. She understood that life was not about avoiding challenges but navigating them with strength and integrity. Each experience, whether positive or difficult, contributed to her growth and shaped the woman she had become. By the end of the fourth part of her journey, she felt empowered. She had faced public attention, navigated criticism, embraced opportunities, and maintained her privacy. She had learned to assert herself, inspire others, and engage with the world on her own terms. The hidden life she had once cherished had evolved into a life where she could be seen, respected, and true to herself simultaneously. And for the first time, she felt a deep sense of accomplishment and readiness for whatever the world would bring next. By the time the fifth stage of her journey arrived, her life had transformed completely. The woman who had once moved quietly through the world, unnoticed and hidden, now faced a reality where her name, her presence, and her story were known to many. She had become a figure of curiosity, admiration, and inspiration, but the change was not just external. It had reshaped her sense of self, her confidence, and her understanding of what it meant to live fully. The morning began like any other, yet it carried a sense of promise and anticipation. She woke to the soft light filtering through her curtains, a sound of life outside her window, and a quiet awareness that today was another step forward. She moved through her routine with care, enjoying the simple moments. A cup of tea, a glance out the window, a deep breath. Each act reminded her of the life she had built for herself, a life she could now balance with the demands and attention of the world beyond. Her husband, as always, was a constant presence. They spoke over breakfast about the upcoming events and meetings that she had chosen to attend. He offered support and guidance, but he also reminded her of one essential truth. She was in control. The power to decide how much of herself to reveal and when to retreat was hers alone. She had learned this over the past months, and it had become the foundation of her confidence. That day, she was scheduled to visit a school to speak with young women about courage, self-respect, and the importance of making choices true to oneself. She had prepared her thoughts carefully, choosing words that reflected her journey from a hidden life to one of recognition and personal empowerment. As she arrived, she felt a flutter of nerves, but it was different from before. This time, the nerves carried not fear, but excitement and purpose. The room was filled with eager faces, young women looking for guidance, inspiration, and stories of resilience. She stood before them, took a deep breath, and began to speak. Her voice was steady, her words sincere. She told them about her quiet life, the choices she had made to remain hidden, and the moment when the world discovered her name. She spoke of fear, hesitation, courage, and the realization that being visible did not mean losing oneself. Each word resonated with the audience, sparking nods, smiles, and quiet understanding. After her speech, several young women approached her, sharing personal stories and seeking advice. She listened patiently, offering guidance and encouragement. It was in these moments that she understood the full impact of her journey. Her experiences were no longer private. They had become lessons, inspiration, and reassurance for others facing their own challenges. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment and purpose, knowing that her visibility could empower and uplift. The days that followed continued to be filled with similar experiences. Invitations to speak, participate in charitable events, and mentor others came steadily. She selected each opportunity carefully, ensuring that her engagement aligned with her values and comfort. Through this process, she discovered that public attention could be navigated thoughtfully, maintaining personal integrity while making a meaningful impact. Despite the demands of her new life, she preserved her private moments. She continued to enjoy quiet mornings in her apartment, walks in the park, and evenings at the piano. These moments remained sacred, grounding her in her identity and reminding her of the woman she had always been. The balance between visibility and privacy, attention and solitude, had become her guiding principle. One evening, she reflected on the path she had traveled. From a life of quiet invisibility to public recognition and influence, the journey had been both challenging and transformative. She realized that the world could observe her, comment on her life, and even speculate, but it could never define her. Her identity, values, and strength were hers alone, untouched by external forces. Her relationship with her husband had also evolved. Together, they navigated the complexities of public attention while preserving the intimacy and trust that had always defined their marriage. He admired her courage, wisdom, and grace, and she admired his unwavering support and belief in her abilities. Their bond had grown stronger, a foundation that allowed her to face the world with confidence and authenticity. The media, once a source of anxiety, had become a platform she could manage. She learned to engage selectively, choosing interviews and appearances that aligned with her values and allowed her to present herself authentically. She discovered that attention did not have to be overwhelming or controlling. It could be a tool to share her story, advocate for causes she cared about, and connect with others meaningfully. She also began writing about her experiences, creating articles, essays, and reflections that captured the journey from hidden life to public recognition. Writing became another avenue for expression, a way to reach audiences far beyond her immediate environment. Her words resonated with many, and she realized that storytelling could be a powerful force for connection, inspiration, and empowerment. Through all these experiences, she maintained a strong sense of self. She knew that recognition did not equate to validation, and she refused to let the opinions of others dictate her worth. She had discovered that true strength came from within, from a clear understanding of her values, choices, and identity. The external attention was a reflection of curiosity and interest, but it did not define her essence. One day, she was invited to participate in a national conference focused on women's empowerment. The event promised a large audience, media coverage, and significant attention. She prepared meticulously, choosing a message that reflected both her personal journey and universal lessons. When the day arrived, she delivered her speech with poise and authenticity. The audience responded with admiration, applause, and heartfelt engagement. She realized that her story, once hidden, now had the power to influence and inspire on a much larger scale. After the conference, she returned home, reflecting on how far she had come. She thought about the woman she had been, quiet, hidden, cautious, and compared her to the woman she had become, confident, courageous, and self-aware. The journey had not been easy, but it had revealed her resilience, adaptability, and inner strength. She felt a deep sense of gratitude for the experiences that had shaped her and for the support of those who had stood by her, particularly her husband. Her evenings at home remained a time of reflection and restoration. The piano became a sanctuary once more, a space where she could reconnect with herself, process her experiences, and find peace. Each note she played carried memories, emotions, and a reminder of the journey she had undertaken. Music, she realized, was both a refuge and a celebration of the life she had embraced. As her public presence stabilized, she became more deliberate in shaping her narrative. She engaged with communities, advocated for causes close to her heart, and shared her story to inspire others. She understood that visibility could be a powerful tool when used thoughtfully, and she wielded it with care, integrity, and purpose. She also maintained close connections with her inner circle. Friends, family, and trusted colleagues remained important sources of support and grounding. She valued these relationships deeply, recognizing that public recognition could be isolating if not balanced with genuine personal connections. Her private life, once hidden, now coexisted harmoniously with her public presence. Through all these experiences, she grew in confidence and self-understanding. She no longer feared attention, criticism, or scrutiny. She had learned to navigate the world with grace, assertiveness, and authenticity. She knew that she could maintain her values, protect her privacy, and still engage meaningfully with the world around her. The hidden life she had once led had evolved into a life of intentional visibility, empowerment, and fulfillment. One evening, as she played the piano, she reflected on the journey from invisibility to recognition. She thought about the fears she had faced, the challenges she had overcome, and the opportunities she had embraced. She realized that being discovered had not diminished her. It had strengthened her, revealing a resilience and courage she had never fully known. She had faced the world and emerged not only intact but empowered. Her final reflection was simple yet profound. Life had taken her from a place of hiding to a world of visibility, attention, and influence. She had learned that true strength lay in maintaining authenticity, setting boundaries, and embracing opportunities with courage. Recognition, she realized, was not about ego or validation. It was about the power to impact others positively while remaining true to oneself. As she looked out at the city lights from her apartment window, she felt a deep sense of peace. She had completed the journey from hidden life to public recognition, and she had done so on her own terms. The world knew her name, but she had remained herself. She had discovered her strength, embraced her visibility, and found a harmonious balance between the private and public aspects of her life. Her story, once hidden, was now a testament to courage, resilience, and self-awareness. She had navigated fear, curiosity, and scrutiny, and in doing so, she had empowered herself and inspired others. The journey had not been easy, but it had been transformative. She had faced the world, been discovered, and emerged as a woman fully in control of her life, her identity, and her destiny. As she played the final notes on her piano that night, she smiled. She had completed a journey that few could understand but that had reshaped her in profound ways. The hidden wife was no more, replaced by a woman who had embraced her name, her story, and her place in the world. She was visible, respected, and empowered, and she knew that whatever the future held, she could face it with confidence, grace, and unwavering self-belief.